Welcome to War Room Impeachment. We are live on Capitol Hill as we are 7 days a week, and we've been, I think, since the 14th of October. We're here live every day from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. until the day after the acquittal or exoneration of Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. It's episode 108, and my wingman, Jason Miller, is here. Raheem Kassam is on assignment today. Raheem is the architect of the Brexit communication strategy, and Jason Miller was the chief communications strategist for the Trump 2016 campaign and was also the comms director for the transition. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Salem Radio broadcasting nationwide, America's Voice.news, the biggest, most important streaming service in the country because they're the guys that bring every time there is the live stream from the Trump rally, so you can see it start to finish. Really honored by America's Voice the other day. I did a 1-hour special War Room Impeachment with Peter Bergen from CNN on his amazing new book, Trump and His Generals, The Cost of Chaos. Peter was fantastic. And our understanding is that the deplorables loved it, so it was a good. And it's not a super pro-Trump book, but it's a good look at what he's got. Also, Newsmax TV, Chris Ruddy's the fastest growing cable news operation in the country. And since the story yesterday was One American News is now up for sale, according to the Wall Street Journal, for $250 million. We think Chris and the guys at Newsmax have done very well. So, Jason, we got a lot of news. We got Jim Schultz, who's Don McGahn's right hand on the at the White House Counsel's office, has been able to help us with David Rifkin and Bill McGinley, the cabinet secretary, have walked us through the technicalities of what's happened over the last couple of days. Jim Schultz is going to join us momentarily, but huge news coming out of Asia. Huge news coming out of Asia. Massive win for the global populist nationalist movement in Taiwan, Mr. Jason Miller.
Yeah, so the current president, Tsai Ing-wen, was reelected, beating back the mainland China-influenced party. Steve, you're the expert in this realm, so I'll go the ramifications of why it matters to Americans.
This is the Kuomintang, the KMT, which is a traditional nationalist party that actually fought Mao Zedong and then went to Taiwan, has now been infested with CCP. In fact, they were the party that was calling for more union with China, with the CCP. She ran a historic campaign, 57% of the votes. So this is almost a landslide. The largest percentage, I think, ever in Taiwan's history turned out. I think over 72%. We're still getting all the facts and details, but I was honored with the people in Taiwan to actually broadcast many times over the last week to our friends in Taiwan. And remember, the reason it's so important, President Trump took the call from her in early December, had a full meltdown of the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, they sent a delegation over here to lecture Jared Kushner, General Flynn, and myself, and Peter Navarro about the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China, of CCP, which is they consider Taiwan. So I got to tell you, this is not quite the Brexit vote in June of 2016 that was inextricably linked, but this shows you that President Trump's message of freedom and democracy is spreading throughout the world. Massive victory in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago. Massive victory. When people get to vote, good things happen. Let's go to we'll have more tomorrow on Taiwan and maybe even an interview. By the way, just a heads up, I'm on Maria Bartiromo tomorrow with the Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, and the Minority Leader McCarthy. So we're going to be talking about the China deal. We're going to be talking about economic warfare on Iran and a whole host of things. Now I want to bring in Jim Schultz. Are you with us, Jim?
Steve, I'm here. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, brother? So it's Jason Miller, Steve Bannon. We got Jim Schultz, former White House Counsel office. So, Jim, walk us through, Nancy Pelosi, in your view, the master political strategist. Do you think she's had a win here? Walk us through what's going to happen next week, because I happen to think it's a win, but I know my brethren in the deplorables don't agree with that. Jason Miller and Raheem Kassam definitely don't agree with it. But what is your view? What's going to happen next week? How does she play this, and do you think it's a win for her?
I don't see any of this as a win for her, Steve. She started, remember, the moment she delayed sending these articles of impeachment over, she made a big political mistake, in my view. Other things happen in the world. The things that you just talked about happened in the world. The Iran situation happened in the world. And people move on from that topic. And people have, other than the people that have been paying attention from day one and wanted to impeach from day one. Most Americans are moving on to things that matter to them. The China issue, Iran, the economy, all the things that Americans care about day in and day out. This issue has passed her by.
You don't think? Okay, so the intense urgency of now, is that how they phrase it?
Yeah, the fierce urgency.
The fierce urgency of now, because he's a clear and present danger. That's why we have to ruin your Christmas holidays. Do you think that's offset? Okay, your thing is that they've shown this not urgent, right? Because they can take their time. Jump in here, Miller, because I know you don't agree, but because she's to her base and maybe even some independents, they've been able to expose the fact that, you know, this may not be, to their point of view, I'm not saying agree with their point of view, that this is not going to be a fair trial. And she's also got now people coming forward to be witnesses.
Well, and that's the key. Well, the key point, Steve, is that she has Democrats in the media now criticizing her, and they haven't explained what the delay is for. If there was some very compelling rationale, something that would pass the media sniff test as far as why Pelosi was delaying this, then maybe she could keep it going.
Because you want to know the venue of what the fair trial is going to be. If you don't have witnesses, it's not a fair trial. You don't think she sold that?
No, because the House doesn't control the Senate. That's just silly.
Yeah, but you can negotiate. I mean, did she not get witnesses? Bolton came forward and said, "I'll be a give me a subpoena and I'll be a witness."
Yeah, but
and now you have Susan Collins. Jump in here, Schultz. You're usually pretty obnoxious. So this is not your CNN gig where you just got to sit there and Cuomo. I know you play the Washington Generals to Cuomo's Harlem Globetrotters all the time.
Book deal Bolton is not going to.
The reason Miller's in my basement is the fact that he gave too much resistance at CNN.
So here's the thing, Steve. So you have witnesses coming forward now, and Bolton says he'll testify. They had all this opportunity to do this with the witnesses that they wanted, to go through the court system, avail themselves of the court system. I mean, Bolton isn't going to be dispositive on anything. We all know that. I mean, you're still talking about bringing in folks. They wanted to bring in Mulvaney. They wanted to bring in all these folks. They chose not to. The crazy thing is, I saw an article today where they're talking about, well, if the trial isn't...
Hold on, slow down. What do you mean they chose not to? They sent this...
They chose not to. They chose not to do it at the House level because they chose not to avail themselves of the rights that they have in the court system. They could have gone through the court system, gotten witnesses, and arguments could have been made on both sides that there are.
But to go through the court system and have a legal case about the separation of powers would have taken 6 months to a year. That would have gone against their narrative of the fierce urgency of now. He's a clear and present danger. He's getting in front.
But they've already lost that argument, right? So this just proves that the whole thing has been contrived for political purposes. You have to hurry up. This is urgent. And we're not going to worry about these witnesses. We're not going to go through the courts. We're not going to follow the rule of law here. We're just going to bring the people up that we think are going to say what we want them to say and ask for folks, and then the White House is going to say no because they have the right to say no. And then we're not going to go to the court system because there's not, this is too important. It's too urgent. And then they hold everything up for political purposes, and now it's blown up in our face.
Yeah, I mean, Jim makes a great point here about the selective witnesses that were called. We didn't hear from the whistleblower. We didn't hear from the second whistleblower, who, as President Trump always points out, disappeared. We didn't hear from Hunter Biden. And again, they didn't actually go and subpoena Bolton to come in to the House. Now, they did for McGahn, and that's still going on in the courts. And I think this will be a future effort by the Democrats, depending on the Supreme Court outcome regarding McGahn's testimony and executive privilege. That will come back at a certain point.
Listen, in the Wall Street Journal article we'll get to, Michael Bender was on Brian Williams last night with Andy Carney. We're going to get to this. Look, the thesis here is that this impeachment process is an ongoing process. It doesn't end here, right? It's
permanent impeachment party.
Permanent impeachment. It's not going to stop here. Now they're going to get the whole Soleimani, the imminent threat. He did it for political reasons. That's a whole new deal that's coming, right? You can see that's running right now. Jim, can you walk us through what you think right now as you see it, given what she signaled yesterday? Walk us through the logistics. What's the critical path of happens next week for the audience?
So before we get to that, Steve, I want to talk about an article that I read this morning where the Democrats are now pushing out this ridiculous theory that now the Supreme Court can step in if an aggrieved party, and the aggrieved party in this case would be the party of impeachment, determines that this was not a fair enough trial.
Oh yeah.
Under the impeachment provisions of the Constitution.
Let's go, Jim. Let's go. Where's that article? We're going to pull it up and put it on our site, warroom.org, which is now 1 million downloads, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday's show crossed the 1 million barrier.
Subscribe to the podcast, please.
Subscribe to the podcast. It's all free. Give a review, and you got to remember that we're getting a big clap from Nancy Pelosi, the master political strategist, giving us the alligator clap. Remember, but this is unusual because nobody's got those kind of downloads. They're on live radio and cable TV. Jim, so where's the article?
So articles at Washington Post. The Supreme Court can review an unfair impeachment trial is the name of the article, and it's a piece kind of describing a historic case, not the Nixon that we're talking about, another Nixon. But the bottom line is there were some justices that said, look, if there's an aggrieved party here, we may review this in an impeachment context if the aggrieved party wasn't treated fairly or wasn't a fair process. Well, here's the whole problem with this new argument that they're trying to push out now. It goes right back to the point that I made earlier. The Democrats, the party of impeachment, didn't want to avail themselves of the court process at the beginning. Now, all of a sudden, Mitch McConnell's going to put together, it's within his right to determine the procedure for this trial. He's going to set the procedure for this trial, and well within his right, with the documents and evidence that exist today that came through that contrived investigation that went through that 3 different levels in the House. The first one that was a train.
But hang on a second and jump in here, Miller. Hang on for a second. Somebody's got to play the devil's advocate here because you guys turned this into a partisan hack show. No. The difference in the construct that McConnell's using, he uses the Clinton construct from the late 90s. But the difference was you had 2 or 3 years of witnesses. You had testimony. You could use that to make the 2 cases and then go to the witnesses because you had it here. You haven't had any. You technically haven't had any direct party witnesses, aren't they? That's what they're arguing? You can't have the structure be the same because they're 2 different things.
But remember, Steve, this is all on. This was a rushed investigation from the outset. Yes, they had a ton of witnesses. Yes, a ton of documents. But remember what we had during the Clinton years. We had a special counsel that was appointed that conducted an investigation. This wasn't a real investigation. This is something they brought in a bunch of witnesses.
So why don't you open it up? Why don't you open it up to? Okay, so why don't you open it up to witness testimony now?
There's no ability to have special. There's no special counsel ability at this point. But the bottom line is there was no real evidentiary hearing. Like all of that took place by and through grand juries. If this was a real grand jury, Steve, we wouldn't know any of these facts. Witnesses would feel comfortable to come forward because they would have had the secrecy component of it. If an investigation was conducted the way a real investigation is conducted, they would have some credibility here. This was just political from the start. And I get it, impeachment is a political process, but the Democrats can't have it both ways here. They want to say, well, we want a real trial, but they didn't conduct a real investigation.
Right. I mean, in a real trial, both sides can call witnesses.
Right.
And Republicans weren't allowed to call witnesses.
So let's go to the confusing narrative we got now, because I think people are going to need narrative clarity. And Jim, I want you to jump in here. But the way it's, and we got to get some clarity about what the messaging is coming out of our side, the White House, et cetera, because to me it's a confusion. And I think the Laura Ingraham interview last night maybe added that confusion. Because here's the range of alternatives you've got. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schultz. You've got a immediately get up and dismiss it on the facts, kind of the Josh Hawley. Now that's going to be transmitted. You don't have to worry about that, but actually dismiss it out of hand, right? Motion to dismiss. It's a total farce. You get rid of it. But as Mike Braun and others have sat in this chair said before, that is not, the people will think that is, the people in Indiana and others will think that's rigged because, they didn't actually vet what the House did. The number 2 is
Let me take that on its face.
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
So on its face there, that has worse political implications. If we were in a court of law, I think we'd have a real strong argument that a motion to dismiss is possible here and something that, as a strategy, you would employ and seek a motion to dismiss based upon the fact that there isn't evidence to support anything that they're alleging here.
So you're saying legally you would tell your client in a normal thing to get a dismissal here, summary judgment essentially. You would argue to your client, let's go do that.
Yeah, sure, because you get at the end of the whole thing, and most of the testimony that was given, again, if we're in a court of law and going through what the Democrats now want to say, we need a fair trial, if you will, meaning it's a traditional trial. In a court of law, most of that evidence would have been inadmissible as hearsay.
But
no question about it.
But agree, Miller, jump in. You agree that the politics of that is the permanent impeachment party is always going to wave the bloody shirt that you had the votes and that's why you dismissed it, but because you dismissed it because you were afraid of the merits of the case, right, Mr. Schultz?
No, that's right. I thought you were talking to Miller on that one.
No, I'm waking Miller up. I just wanted to jump in here.
From a political perspective, I think it's dangerous to go down that route. And quite frankly, if we go down that route, we're going to be hypocritical. Because just like the Democrats are hypocrites right now, because what they've asked for is this, trial that we would see in the context of a court system, after they've done an investigation that we wouldn't see in the traditional court system. We'd be failing the same way, and politically, you're right, they'd be saying cover up, cover up, cover up. So, no, I don't think that's a viable option.
So to that point, last night President Trump said that he wants a trial, and I want to go ahead and play.
Let's play this.
Let's go and play this clip.
Because this interview was kind of explosive. While we're getting you can tell Raheem's not here. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing.
We got it?
Yeah, we'll get to this clip in a moment here. But President Trump very clearly said last night that he wants a trial.
Okay, so here we go, Schultz. The bid in the ass now is the short trial, which is, Adam Schiff takes the 7,000 pages of Star Chamber and in hearings. He curates it down to 3 or 4 days. So President Trump has got to sit there and listen to Adam Schiff hammering him with the highlight reel, the SportsCenter highlight reel of all the worst stuff, right? He's got to listen to that. Then Pat Cipione gets to go for a day or two with whatever's good out there because you can't bring new evidence in, which is not it's pretty thin gruel. And then you have a vote versus let's have a trial. Let him get Bolton. Let him get Mulvaney. Let him get Vogt. Let him get Rudy. Right? Versus we get the whistleblower. We get Hunter Biden. We get Joe Biden. Right? Who else is on our hit list? The second whistleblower, Brennan, right? Let's get him. Let's get all the emails. Let's get in there. So, Jim, where do you think we come down on that?
So I think we come down probably in the middle again, and I think you're going to end up with something akin to a case where it's going to be incumbent upon Cipollone and his team to really, poke holes in the way that the investigation was conducted, the quality of the evidence that's being presented. You start opening the door to all these other issues. Quite frankly, you don't put someone on the stand as a lawyer if you don't know what they're going to say, right? I mean, that's just not something you do in the context of a real trial. So all this idea that the Democrats want a real trials don't happen this way. Right, in the context of a prosecution, you would have grand jury testimony of the witnesses that are going to come before the court and come before a jury and give testimony. They don't have that here because the Democrats didn't care enough to avail themselves of the court system to properly call witnesses. And when the witnesses didn't show, or the witnesses had an argument or argued the subpoena was invalid, that they didn't go through the court system in order to get them before the tribunal.
Okay, Jim, I guess it's Jim Schultz, former White House counsel deputy to Don McGahn. Let's go to Laura Ingraham.
Yeah, we're concerned because you ran on America.
Lou Dobbs is concerned too, but I'll say, Lou, here's the problem.
I'll come back on this. This is a live radio Jason Miller fail.
Yeah,
That's
so okay.
My broadcasting privileges have been revoked.
No. Where's Raheem? No, I want to go back to something very important, Jim. Is that the jury? Is the jury the senators, or is the jury the American people and also the world? Because the problem we're getting is that this too tightly argued this kind of legalese with Pat Cipione and others that are trying to have this short trial. Don't we need the witnesses the president wants? Don't we need Hunter Biden? Don't we need Joe Biden? Don't we need the whistleblower? Don't we need to see all the connections and interconnections and get them up there so that people realize this is not tinfoil hat, but this is actually the nullification project was in full bloom, and this is a foreign policy dispute between the Washington consensus and the permanent political class of both parties in American First national security policy. Because if you go down the legal thing, and you can see it right now, Jim, I'd like to know your opinion. Should Matt Gaetz, should Mark Meadows, should Jim Jordan, should Lee Zeldin, should the fire breathers in the House be part of the team that, if Alan Dershowitz is going to be your guy, do we need a constitutional theorist from Harvard in the well of the Senate, or do we need fire breathers?
So this whole idea, the first question, Steve, who's the jury here, the American people or the senators? I say now that there is no jury here. This is not a traditional trial. This is a political process, right? And the Democrats, the party of impeachment, wants to have it both ways. They can't have it both ways, and they're finding that that's how Nancy Pelosi has gotten herself jammed up on this issue to begin with. That okay, we need a real trial. This is all urgent. We're gonna run roughshod over this whole thing. We're gonna call witnesses during the investigative phase, but we're not gonna. The witnesses who don't show, we don't care about them. We'll deal with them at trial. Like, none of this makes sense. You can't turn around and say who's the jury. You have elected senators who are representing their states in Congress, and those senators are acting in their constitutional capacity as senators. They're not a juror, but they're looking at this and making judgments based upon facts that are going to be brought before them from the investigation that Congress conducted, as shoddy as it was. And we're going to see how shoddy that investigation really was when we go.
But do you think? Okay, we only got 30 seconds here. Do you think they're going to be able to turn the guns around on the Democrats and put them on trial, put that shoddiness on trial? Is that what you're arguing? You're going to be able to turn it around, and Pat Cipione's going to do that. He's going to turn it around and show the nation this is a total sham.
Yeah, that's what they have to do, because it is. Right? The thing wasn't conducted. It wasn't conducted like a real investigation would from the beginning. You don't do an investigation like this in a matter of months. It just doesn't work that way. Any prosecutor would tell you that. You need to. This would be something that would take a long time to do. Remember how long did the Whitewater investigation
went on for years? Jim, we got to bounce. Jim Schultz, CNN, White House Counsel's Office. We'll take a short break. Be back in a moment.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Impeachment. We're live on Capitol Hill, just yards away from where several weeks ago, right before Christmas, in ruining everybody's Christmas holidays, was the impeachment of the 45th President of the United States, only the third time in the Republic's history. We're about to begin the trial of the century, as we've been calling it here on War Room Impeachment. Remember, we're here every day live, 7 days a week, until the day after the acquittal or the exoneration of Donald J. Trump in the trial of the century. Of course, President Trump calls it the crime of the century. So being the crime of the century, and we say it's a trial of the century, what did he say on Laura Ingraham last night that I thought was very supportive of kind of what the deplorables want? Because the deplorables argue something different than Jim Schultz. Look, Jim Schultz is a fantastic lawyer. He was actually the individual that was in charge of, during the White House Counsel, the first 2 or 3 years he was there, he was actually in charge of the deconstruction of the administrative state. He was Don McGahn's weapon in really this massive deregulation we're going through that's unlike the animal spirits of capitalism. It's one of the cornerstones of the Trump movement. But I think Jim is too lawyerly in this, because we're not in a legal process now. We're in a political process. So what did President Trump argue last night?
Yeah, so President Trump made a lot of news last night in the Laura Ingraham interview, specifically about the trial and what it's all going to look like. So he was asked a question about the impeachment team, and he thought, or the impeachment managers, and he thought Laura was asking about the impeachment team, and he said that we have a team. He said that his team is set. Now, later on, Mike Bender, when he was on with Brian Williams at an 11 p.m. hour, he said he believes that Jordan and Ratcliffe and maybe Dershowitz will be added to the team. Yeah. But President Trump was very definitive last night on Laura Ingraham that we have a team. That was his direct quote. So he also made very clear.
Does that mean to you that you think that it's going to be limited fire breathers? It'll be Jordan and Ratcliffe, maybe two?
Maybe two.
Maybe two.
And I think just based on other things we're hearing from folks,
Maybe
think
zero.
Maybe zero.
Okay.
So I'm concerned about that because we know
that's not a good thing. We think you got to have a couple of fire breathers.
Correct. Because again, you got to have the appropriate response in the same medium. So if Shifty Adam Schiff and Hakeem Jeffries and whoever else they put on that are attacking Trump in the well of the Senate, we need people who can fire back.
If they're telling President Trump right now that we need him on TV, and if they're on we need these guys on TV. What the TV is going to see, the global television audience is going to be mesmerized and watching what goes on in the well of the Senate. And obviously, Mitch McConnell and these guys want the decorum and the dignity and the gravitas because it's House of Commons, House of Lords.
And in fact, one of the details to that, this is kind of a small kind of TV and broadcasting thing, but people forget that you didn't used to have a whole screen full of text or chyron, but it was really during that Clinton impeachment trial, and Fox News was really the groundbreaker.
The leader.
They have their brain room in New York where they were the oons who put up all that text on screen, and so everything from here's the bio of Charles Ruff to all these details
that galvanized the right on the Clinton trial.
Absolutely, and so people will be, again, Steve, you hit the nail on the head on this. This will be a global TV event, and President Trump deserves to have his best and brightest.
Okay.
Now, the other thing where he made a lot of news was he said that the trial. So here's where we have a little bit of we're kind of hearing two different things. President Trump said that he thinks the trial will only be a few days or a week, which would mean that would be the McConnell plan with essentially no witnesses.
Right.
But Laura Ingraham pushed him on this, and the president made very clear, in very clear terms, he wants witnesses, and specifically both whistleblowers, Shifty Adam Schiff, the Inspector General.
Yeah,
he went hard
saw
at the Inspector General, which that was a little bit of a new wrinkle. I don't recall hearing the Inspector General being listed out as a potential witness. And then Sleepy Joe, and then Where's Hunter, which is the reason why.
And the whistleblower and the other whistleblowers. Here's the thing. You saw the dichotomy there. The first part is what Mitch McConnell and these guys are telling him. You want it short. It's going to take a couple of days. Just take the pain. As soon as we got 51 votes, we're going to call a vote. We're going to get out of there. Right? No harm, no foul. And what you hear is Trump being Trump. You hear the real Donald Trump. That's where you hear the guy that won the presidency. That's where you hear the guy who, against all the great advice of Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and all these stiffs, right, that if he had followed their playbook, he would have been known as losing to Hillary Clinton by one of the biggest landslides in American history. Instead, he won in the greatest come-from-behind victory in American history and galvanized a movement around him. That's the long trial. What are the Republican? What's the Senate afraid of, Jason Miller?
Well, ultimately, I think Raheem got it correct the other day when he said that we start pulling in Joe Biden, we start getting to how people in Washington make money, how people come to Congress and the U.S. Senate being effectively paupers, or people are only worth $100,000 or a couple $100,000, and now they're worth tens of millions of dollars. That if you start pulling in Joe Biden, you're just going to really pull back the layers.
If you put Joe Biden on trial and Hunter on trial, you're putting the business model of the permanent political class on trial. And since they're part of the permanent political class, we call it this cutesy name, the swamp. I think we got to drop the swamp. It's too cutesy. This is the permanent aristocracy. In fact, that's where their kids, the princelings, have these deals. That's why a drug addict like Hunter Biden, right, can get this kind of money. And forget that the chump change is Burisma. That's chump change in Ukraine. What you want to put him on trial for is what he did in China. When Joe Biden looked the other way on the militarization of the South China. When Joe Biden stiffed the president of the United States, a guy named Barack Obama. He was supposed to be the lead guy. That's how Hunter got over there in 2013. When you sit there in the Rose Garden, she comes over on a state visit, signs that deal. No more cyber intrusions in our business and no militarization of South China Sea. With Joe Biden as the guy that did that, 6 months later, there's a 100% increase in cyber intrusions, and they militarize the South China Sea. Total epic fail. Huge embarrassment for President Obama. Probably one of his big foreign policy events when he was the guy and thought he really realized we got to get out of CENTCOM and pivot to Asia. This is the whole thesis of what he was trying to do to get the country to do it. Biden stiffs him. And by the way, the son, who's a total and complete incompetent, okay? And the reason I can say drug addict because Biden got him in as a naval officer, and they dealing drugs to guys in the Navy thrown out in 30 days. You never hear about this on the stage of the debates. This is another pillow fight. Bernie Sanders the other day finally brings up Biden's got some baggage. I think he's got some baggage. And the mainstream media is going crazy. Oh, my God, they're attacking each other. No, that's a pillow fight. That's why Bernie was not the nominee against Hillary Clinton. It had all the corruption. And I don't care about, Rachel Maddow's all on Peter Schweitzer last night, all on the Justice Department not pursuing the Clinton cash investigation. She's corrupt. Okay, the Clintons are corrupt. Everybody knows they're corrupt. The Clinton Initiative, you never hear about this in the Democratic debate. Bernie Sanders, another pillow fight. Joe Biden's totally corrupt. And so you think that what they don't want to do is put the business model of the way this city works on trial. And that's why there's not going to be any Joe Biden.
Absolutely. What Senate decorum really means is we're not going to call each other out for our behind-the-scenes business dealings. That's really what Senate decorum is. Remember when Secretary Clinton came out and she said that they were so broke when she left the administration?
Yeah, there was the legal fees were like $10 million.
She said, we're so broke, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but so broke that they couldn't afford either mortgage.
I remember that. I remember that. So, okay, I want to go back to, but did the president hurt his case in the same interview? He said, because the other day he said, hey, if Bolton wants to testify, I don't think he knows much, but he should be able to testify. Didn't the president say last night, didn't he bring up executive privilege?
Yeah, no, he threw down, no, the president did not hurt his case with regard to impeachment at all.
I'm talking not a case, I'm talking about the long trial. Because if you're going to have if we're going to get the whistleblower, if we're going to get Biden, if we're going to Adam Schiff, if we're going to get IG, and the president's thinking about it because he's even thinking about bringing in Horowitz from the IG report. The president's thinking through who he wants to see, right? If we're bringing in those guys, Bolton, Mulvaney, and that crew have to testify, right?
No, because he can still assert executive privilege, and that's ultimately going to go to the courts. And so if the Democrats want to go and, again, if we want to go and push forward with this impeachment trial and do this right now, I do think that at a certain point, again, this will be a Supreme Court decision ultimately on executive privilege. But here's the thing. Let's say bring in book deal Bolton, which, by the way, I got to give a special shout out to my man Anderson Cooper, whether it's AC himself or folks who are producers on the show.
This is the producers listening to this thing because they take literally Jason Miller's phrase and Anderson Cooper's repeating it last night, right?
Yeah.
Saying he's got the book deal?
Yeah, literally saying what we've been saying. And
you're going to try that again. It's not going to. I'm going to give Jason Miller the hook as my on-air.
He's also got a book to sell and probably a big advance. And so if he gives up a lot of information now, it's maybe going to make the book less. I mean, is it possible he's kind of playing a long game here, that he knew that the president would not want him to testify, would say he was going to exert some form of executive privilege, but he gets the benefit of saying that, he tried to go, and now he's just going to put all that stuff in a book?
You heard it first here on War Room Impeachment. You've been doing this for weeks now. Book deal Bolton.
Book deal Bolton. But this is exactly what it is. John Bolton knows he will never have to go and testify. That is never going to happen,
right,
because
they're going
to assert executive privilege. But here's the thing: keep in mind, they still haven't actually gone and subpoenaed him. So I don't think it ever.
Okay,
happens.
we got two things to go through because John Fredericks, our co-producer, is going to join us to talk about this massive uprising in the Commonwealth of Virginia a week from Monday. There are going to be over 100,000 people at the Capitol in Virginia. The Sanctuary Cities movement about the gun grab takes place. We're going to be actually live broadcast that day, both from here about the impeachment. I'll probably be down with John Fredericks. He's going to tell us about this massive, really grassroots movement to stop the gun grab of the Virginia General Assembly and the left-wing governor of Virginia. Let's walk through the process. I definitely want to talk about what's popping, what's breaking in the Wall Street Journal. I think the New York Times with Maggie Haberman and Annie Carney. And you can tell the permanent impeachment party, the nullification project, has another vector, right? They have another vector. But what do you think happens when Pelosi gets back? Walk through the line. When do you think the Senate actually gets this, and when do you think we got game on?
So in chatting with a couple of folks on both the House and Senate side and who used to work in the White House, Speaker Pelosi still has to come back and actually vote out these House impeachment managers. And so she has to put forward who they're going to be. And I heard some speculation from someone who I consider to be pretty well-versed in this, said this is actually a tough decision for Pelosi, for who she's going to put out there to go and carry this. So you have Adam Schiff, who's become a complete
a lightning rod. Yep.
And someone who's very polarizing. That's why I think it's smart for President Trump to continue hammering Schiff. So then when he is their lead person, then it puts him in a purely partisan light.
Right, the narrative.
She can't put
framing device.
Right, she can't put Jerry Nadler forward because he just gets crushed by everybody.
You'll have another Corey Lewandowski, where the state trooper from the former state trooper from New Hampshire bench pressed Nadler on TV, national TV.
Correct. I'm assuming you'll get a Hakeem Jeffries probably in there, but then you have the real issues of how does Nancy Pelosi diversify her House impeachment manager front? Does she try to sucker in an Alyssa Slotkin or a Mikey Sherrill, one of the Dirty 30, the Democrats from Trump districts, to try to join that team?
Right.
So
the CIA officers, the military officers, the best and the brightest they've got. You try to put them front and center so America can see, well, quote unquote, what she's fighting for, right?
Right. And Slotkin likes the fundraising, so maybe Pelosi can say, look, we're going to make you a fundraising superstar. Don't worry if maybe you lose your district in the fall, but you're going to raise a whole bunch of money. So Pelosi has to take that, and so we think it'll probably be maybe Wednesday or Thursday of this next week that those actually that the House managers get named, and then it gets sent over to the Senate. And so within so right away the Senate has to go and address and acknowledge.
But they've got 2 or 3 days of administrative work, right? So the trial itself won't start in the next week. The technicality will.
Right. Some of the technicality will start, but it won't be until. And keep in mind, we also have MLK Day that's coming up that following
the
Monday.
Weekend, right? So it'll be after Martin Luther King weekend, right?
Right.
You think the real heat starts?
The real heat probably starts somewhere around not this week, but the following week, around maybe that Tuesday or Wednesday. But again, there's some room there for delay. And Steve, I think your point was great when we were talking about this yesterday. Ultimately, Speaker Pelosi does not want President Trump to have the impeachment effort behind him at the time of State of the Union.
Yeah, I think the timing State of the Union.
And here's the critical thing that I think President Trump should
What's
do
the
right
headline?
now.
You already wrote the headline, right?
President Trump delivers State of the Union under cloud of uncertainty.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the New
We
York
already got
Times headline.
they've already got set. They got a typeset.
But here's what President Trump and the administration should do right now. They should go out there and demand that the State of the Union be delayed until after this impeachment
This is
trial.
what I brought it up the other day. The State of the Union must be delayed until we've brought this to a conclusion in the United States Senate. The trial of the century has to be finished before the president goes and addresses the nation in the State of the Union.
I would pick this fight now. I would pick this
100%.
fight hard.
That's
and
why
I
I
would
brought it
say,
up.
you know what?
Yep.
I'm not showing up on this day.
Exactly.
I'm showing up after the
Right.
impeachment fight is done.
100%.
Because otherwise, I mean, he's only going to get, 7 State of the Union speeches during his presidency? Well, unless we elect him to a 3rd or 4th or 5th term,
Right.
just in case any of our triggered friends are listening. But he's probably only going to get 7 State of the Union speeches. And so to go and take one of these off the table, I mean, this is big for, put the partisan politics aside. State of the Union is the State of the Union.
Yeah.
And
This is important for the country. You can't bring him up while he's under trial. You got to. This is why we mentioned it the other day. An effort has to be done by the White House and others to make it right now that, hey, ask politely to move it. But if you don't get a polite response, just say, hey, look, I'm going to show up, a week after, a couple days after this thing's over. The country needs that because that brings it to full closure.
correct.
Okay, speaking of full closure, it's not going to be closure. We have said this from the beginning. The reason we started the show, this is the nullification project. He won the presidency. AP called him the president-elect at 2:30 a.m. in the morning on the 9th of November. And Hillary Clinton was nice enough to contact him and give some congratulations. And at that very moment, with all those thousands of people outside of Trump Tower, the nullification project started to nullify his presidency. And we're seeing this is a permanent impeachment. They will never give it up. They're obsessed by it. And now they've got another vector, and you can tell it's building momentum. And now it's in the Wall Street Journal, and it was in the New York Times yesterday. They think they're bringing this thing up about the action he took against General Soleimani. About was it an imminent threat, and particularly now you got Mike Bender, and here's what we know it is. Gets in the Wall Street Journal, and then it's on Brian Williams at night with Annie Carney and Bender. And this is the quote from the Wall Street Journal's article the 9th. We're going to have this up on the site as the lead story. Mr. Trump, after the strike, told associates he was under pressure to deal with General Soleimani from GOP senators he views as important supporters in his coming impeachment trial in the Senate, associates said. Total blind. It's not a quote, right? It's either in background, but my point is not attributed to anybody. This is a killer quote. They got one. We're digging up Maggie Haberman, Carney in the New York Times. This is the vector they're going to come after, right? Bernie Sanders, I understand, has already put a statement out equating this action with the Gulf of Tonkin, right, which got us into Vietnam, and the weapons of mass destruction. He's making this the trifecta. This is going to be, we're pretty good here about being able to forecast what this is going to be an issue. They're not going to back off this. This is the third vector they're going to come after him on the permanent impeachment party.
Absolutely, and it's going to be everything. Again, where did the initial impeachment push come from? A foreign policy disagreement. Where's this next impeachment push going to come from? A foreign policy
But here's what happened with Mike Lee coming out of this briefing. I think it's incumbent upon the national security team around the president. I think it has to be succinct. The president has to address it. He was fully within his rights. This is now another foreign policy dispute. The case has to be made. Last night, the president broadened it out, said there was 4 embassies. I think this just everybody has to get on the same page, right? Because they're not, and here's why. They're not going to back off. Now they got in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. They're coming, right? And you can see how it's building. It's going to build a momentum. This is going to be in all the Sunday shows. They're going to build off this. This is their new obsession, right? This is where they're going to say he's a clear and present danger, not because he's getting foreign countries, but he's taking autocratic control of the national security process. None of that's true. And this is what I would say is classic. This is the classic type of fake news thing. But this has to be combated. Mr. Miller, you're the master communication strategist. How do you do this?
So President Trump did address some of this last night in the Laura Ingraham interview when he said Laura asked him specifically about this, and she asked if this was to appease Lindsey Graham.
Right, the neocons.
Right.
Because that jumps off the page, right? That the neocons, who are the antithesis of what the Trump movement's about, right? We're about non-intervention or intervention with economic warfare, not kinetic warfare.
Right, and President Trump came right back and said, "Fake news. These are very dishonest fake news people out there who are doing this. These leakers." So he did push back on this directly, but again, Democrats are going to stay harping on that.
They're going to stay hard on this. This is you have said this from the very beginning, from the very first show. Jason Miller said, "Hey, look, this is a permanent thing. This is not going to go away. Don't think, she's driving towards at the time the couple of articles of impeachment, but this is the way that they make up for the weak candidates you have on the witness protection program, which is the Democratic primary, right? Next week in Iowa, they'll have another super low ratings, right? Because you got Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar and all these people that bore people. It's a snooze fest, right? Nobody's exciting. Nobody, and none of them are going to take on Trump. In fact, I'm quite proud of our call on Bloomberg. A year ago, I said Bloomberg is going to be in this race. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the mainstream media and the Democratic Party is all skipping around with their hair on fire now about Steyer in second place in South Carolina. Quantity has a quality all its own. These guys are bringing amount of money. Michael Bloomberg yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he step up and say, I'm putting $1 billion, I'm going to commit $1 billion of capital if I'm not the nominee to make sure Donald Trump is not president of the United States, one large, okay, if I'm not the nominee. And basically the implication, if I am the nominee, and this was Jonathan Chait of the New York Magazine.
Of BOFA fame.
And he came out and said, hey, I'm not a Bloomberg guy, but he may be our best nominee to be if it's Orange Man bad.
One thing real quick that surprised me on this. So when Bloomberg said he's going to put in this money, of course, to help the Democratic nominee, I was surprised more Democrats didn't beat up on him and say, no, you want to have that going. So when Bernie Sanders proves to be an abysmal failure as a candidate, people have a Democrat light in Michael Bloomberg to go. That's the real reason why he's doing it. I'm surprised more people didn't call him out on that.
We got so much to go through, but Raheem and Jason will be here tomorrow. I got to do Maria Bartiromo. I'll be in New York. But real quickly, we got John Fredericks, our co-producer. John, are you on the line? I want to hear about the Virginia rally. We want to get everybody out there a week from Monday at the Capitol in Richmond, Virginia. John, you with us?
Steve, Martin Luther King Day, January 20th, is going to be the biggest rally in the history of Virginia. It's held in Richmond, and it is in response to the gun grab, the assault on the Second Amendment that is going on right now in Virginia. The Democrats took control of Virginia, both houses. They have all the constitutional offices. They ran and were funded by groups that want to take your guns away. The legislation, Steve, that the Democrats have on the table would make Rahm Emanuel in Chicago blush. They want to take everything. If you have an automatic pistol, gone. If you have an automatic, if you have an AR-15, gone. If you have a magazine with over 10 rounds, gone. And if you don't give them up, they're going to put you in jail. This is real stuff that they're going to pass. There's nobody in Virginia to stop them. So on the 20th, Monday, Richmond, there's a rally of people that want to protect the Second Amendment.
And we're going to be broadcasting.
We're going to have 100,000 people.
100,000.
We're going to be live the entire day.
We're going to broadcast with John Frederick. Okay, you talk about this is a mobilization election next November. You want to mobilize? This is what you're going to mobilize around. They're coming to take your weapons in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're going to be there to combat it. See you tomorrow morning with episode 109.